The Giants in 2022, as I talked about them last year, they were expected to finally begin their rebuild under their new head coach and former offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, Brian Daboll. But boy, was I wrong about that. They greatly overachieved in that season by winning more games that they should have to claim a playoff spot. Daniel Jones surprisingly did pretty good for himself. So did Saquon, Barkley, and others. But in fairness against them, their competition consisted of other significantly flawed teams like the Chicago Bears, who else? The Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts. A bunch of very bad teams that they played against. And that included their playoff team that they faced, the Minnesota Vikings, one of the most fraudulent teams that you'll see out there in 2022. And so they beat the Minnesota Vikings, and then they had their own major problems exposed against a much better team in their division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, in that smashing in the divisional round. So nonetheless, the Giants surprisingly had a successful season, 9-7-1. We're the 6th seed in the playoffs. And then they actually upset, or I don't know if you can consider it upset because it was the Vikings for all teams. Yeah, they upset the Minnesota Vikings before they got smashed by the Eagles. But nonetheless, they made it as far as the divisional playoffs. So now your goal for 2023 is to get even further than that. If you're in New York, you got to make the playoffs once more and maybe go even further than that. To do that, you had to answer some questions going into the offseason. As I talked about in February, you had a big decision to make regarding your quarterback, Daniel Jones. We're going to re-sign him, or we're going to try to make a big swing at another quarterback. And then you have to learn to make a decision on your running back, Saquon Barkley. Those two guys, for as good as a year they had in 2022, everything else prior to that was, I don't know. It was 50-50. So looking at some of the events that happened in the offseason, guess what ended up happening? They re-signed Daniel Jones. Not only did they re-sign Daniel Jones, they re-signed him to a big fat contract. I think it was 3 to 4 years with a good amount of money. Damn. The Giants really did commit to Daniel Jones, huh? Danny Penny's in the years prior, and then all of a sudden he has one good year. Okay. They better hope this pays off. They really better hope this investment pays off for them. Because if it doesn't, this is really gonna bite them in the ass. And then they franchise tagged running back Saquon Barkley, but Barkley hasn't signed the franchise tender yet as I'm recording this. But as I'm also recording this, at the time I'm making this, they're still working on a long-term deal. So by now, it could either be Barkley signs a long-term deal, or they don't get it done at the deadline, and either he signs that franchise tag or he doesn't. So it's going to be an interesting scenario. So who knows how it'll play out. Either way, Barkley is in an interesting situation. And then they also made another big move. They traded for Raiders from the Las Vegas Raiders, the tight end Darren Waller, in return for a 3rd-round pick. I think it was a solid move for them, even though Darren Waller has had some injury problems in the last season. But when Darren Waller is on the field, he is pretty productive. He was productive for Derek Carr in the time they were together, and I think Daniel Jones, if he can throw the Waller consistently, Darren Waller could be a very good tight end option for them as well. So looking at some of my offseason priorities for them during that offseason, they had to improve the defense because that secondary was bad. It was pretty bad because when they shut down Dexter Lawrence, when they shut down Kayvon Thibodeau at the defensive line, when there's no pass rush, the secondary was exposed. They literally had no help in the secondary. They were getting torched in that defense. And they also had to find some help at the offensive line because it was a little bit better than past years, but they certainly could use an upgrade over there. Looking at some of their offseason moves, like what they got, they didn't lose a lot. They honestly didn't lose a lot, so that was at least good for the Giants. So they only lost Julian Love to the Seattle Seahawks, probably one of their major positive players on defense. And they lost center John Feliciano to the 49ers. I mean, no, I guess not really too much of a biggie considering what they added anyway. So they also re-signed receiver Darius Slayton, a key piece to their offense. And looking at some of that free agency and draft additions, they signed Paris Campbell, the receiver from the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, some added depth positions. Receiver Jamison Crowder from the Buffalo Bills, so another receiver to go alongside Darius Slayton. Linebacker Bobby Okereke from the Indianapolis Colts as well. And safety Bobby McCain from the Commanders. So that was a solid move from the Giants to snatch away Bobby McCain once he got released from Washington. And then the draft is where they did their dirty work. They got corner Deontay Banks from Maryland. Pretty good move there. And then I like this move too. John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. So he looks like a big upgrade in replacing John Feliciano. And then I was initially down on this move, on this draft pick, because in my filthy casual scouting report, there were some questions I had about this guy, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. So I think it's a good pick from the Giants, but hopefully he pans out because, again, I had questions about Hyatt when I did my scouting report on him, when I did that filthy casual scouting report. They also got a running back, Eric Gray from Oklahoma. So I thought that was a smart move considering in case what happens to Saquon. But we'll see what happens. And then corner Trey Hawkins from Old Dominion. So looking at all these moves by the Giants, I thought they improved themselves nicely. Not great, not like terribly, but it was a nice improvement, like in the middle. They had themselves a solid draft by addressing their needs. They needed a corner since they didn't replace James Bradbury yet, and they did such. Getting Banks and Hawkins. Meanwhile, on the offensive side, you put some flyers out on center and John Michael Schmitz, and he looks like a big upgrade. Like I said, in replacing John Feliciano, he has some pretty good blocking skills that can really help the middle of that offensive line for New York, especially when it comes to protecting Daniel Jones. Because in that game against the Eagles in the divisional, it was pretty bad luck for that Giants offensive line. And as I going back to Jalen Hyatt, I was a little suspect in that evaluation, but there's still plenty of time for him to develop into a secondary or maybe even a top role in that Giants receiving core. So I imagine he won't be starting right away, but yeah, if he develops along, then that would be a big boost for Big Blue's offense. So looking at some of their key games for 2023, you got a really big one to start off with. The very first week against the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, the NFL schedules it in prime time on Sunday night. The bright lights in New York are shining yet again for Danny Dimes and the Giants. So it's going to be a big game, a big test for Daniel Jones and the Giants. Can they thrive in the bright lights against Dak Prescott and the boys? And then you got to travel to San Francisco 2 weeks later to play the 49ers on Amazon Prime Video, John, on Thursday against that strong 49ers defense and whoever's going to be their quarterback. And then you have to travel to Western New York to Buffalo to take on the Bills a couple weeks later in week 6. Josh Allen's no joke either. And then several weeks later, and perhaps what could be a big divisional game, week 16 at the Philadelphia Eagles on Christmas Day. It'll depend on where both teams stand, but hell, it could either be an interesting game or just another Christmas Day game. So when I look at the Giants and what they did during this offseason, entering this upcoming regular season, I have to wonder if re-signing Daniel Jones is going to be worth it. Because, like I said, for as good as the 2022 season that Daniel Jones has had, everything else before that was not great. It was not great. But who knows? Maybe his success will carry over into 2023, considering how much Brian Daboll has really challenged Daniel Jones to step up his game, get more aggressive. He made him use his legs more, which was key to the Giants winning these games late in the season to get that playoff spot. But unfortunately, that was limited in that last playoff game. But yeah, one good season doesn't exactly equate, a big fat contract, to be honest with you. But, it's something for the Giants to really consider if it's really going to be worth it. But who knows? We'll see. So the New York Giants, made some good work in the offseason with free agency and the draft to fill some needs. But again, it's going to depend on how Daniel Jones does. Is he going to show that he'll continue to improve? If he does, perhaps the Giants can make a bit of a run to the playoff spot again. But if he doesn't, then expect more of the same from Danny Pennies in 2023. Now, I don't expect the Giants to go like total free fall or like take a big regression or anything like that. I expect the Giants, to stay a little bit in the median, like where they were in 2022, maybe 9-8, because they added enough good pieces, free agency in the draft that they can stay competitive in not just the division, but in this weaker NFC. So they do have themselves a shot to compete at a postseason berth. So not all is lost. It just depends. Again, are they going to get Saquon for week one? And are they going to get a good productive season from not just him, but from Daniel Jones? And are they going to get their investments paid off from their defensive signings, their offensive line? Again, everything's going to revolve around all that. But the most important thing that's going to revolve around is Daniel Jones.